This Week in Tiger Athletics. I'm your host, Haley White, and joining me today is FHSU SID Ryan Prickett, and he's going to help me break down This Week in Tiger Athletics. So men's soccer fell to Indianapolis 3-2 during the first round of the NCAA D2 tournament.
Yeah, and the men started out really well in that game. Santiago Agudelo put in a couple of goals there within the first 25 minutes of action. You get out to a 2-0 lead, you got to be feeling pretty good about yourself, and unfortunately, Indianapolis just rallied immediately after Santiago's second goal. Just when you thought, hey, 2-0 lead, let's play defense and go ahead and get out of this thing. Just fine. Obviously, our defense broke down a couple of times really quick, and all of a sudden we found ourselves in a 2-2 game. And then in the second half, we had an opportunity. Sonny actually had a good look at the net. He broke free alone and just missed the net wide in a one-on-one situation with the goalkeeper. And I think that right there, that would have been our chance to maybe, get that advantage again, have that feeling like, okay, let's close this thing out, but it stayed 2-2, and then Indianapolis had a really good set play there with about 20 minutes to go in the game, and got that goal that they needed. And Indianapolis obviously wasn't the top team in the Great Lakes Valley Conference this year, but I think as a whole we saw that conference thrive this year. They just had the better teams this year, and we lost to Maryville earlier in the season, and they were a team that advanced as well, and then also Bellarmine. We'll see how all that stuff breaks out. They haven't played the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 games yet, which will be this weekend, but Indianapolis got through that tournament and beat Lake Erie, the #1 seed. So I think that that's a feather in the cap of that conference, and obviously just seeing how we did against that conference this year, they obviously were the better conference, and but it was a good year for the men. 13 wins, did what we were supposed to do, got to the NCAA tournament, gave ourselves a chance to maybe make a run at it again, but unfortunately it wasn't to be, and I guess that's just how the ball rolls some days. So. And
that wraps up the season under first-year head coach Cleary.
Yeah, Jerry did a great job in his first year here, and we'll see how everything pans out for the next year. He'll be getting one of his first recruiting classes in here, so we'll see how the talent mix. I know right now we've already had a couple of guys from the Wichita area commit to the program. One's a transfer, one's a high school recruit, and then also they landed a recruit from Japan, and so that might be one of our first Japanese athletes that we've had here in I don't know how long. At least as far as I can remember, I don't remember one in my time here as sports information director. So we'll see if we get a little more of that world flavor. We've had some success of getting guys up from South America, and even some guys from the European countries as well. So we'll see what Jerry brings in for the year ahead next fall.
Yes, good to see what he'll do with this program. FHSU Wrestling will host the Bob Smith Open this Saturday. Yeah,
a big week for Tiger Wrestling. Obviously, the Bob Smith Open, one of the bigger tournaments where our guys, a lot of times we'll wrestle up to 20 of our guys on our roster, and just as long as everybody's healthy. And so it's a good tournament to see where a lot of our guys are at. Obviously, several of them have already put a feather in their cap by wrestling well at other tournaments here early in the season. So it's a great event to showcase Tiger Wrestling. Also, we'll probably see, I would imagine, about 10 to 15 teams will come compete in this tournament. It's just a matter of how many each school wants to enter into the contest or the tournament format. And last year I think we had somewhere between 150 to 200 wrestlers. I've seen the thing when some years we've had all the way upwards of 350. So it's all just random of how many guys want to get placed in the tournament from their coaches, and what those coaches want to see some of those guys do from each of the schools. We'll even have, it's an open tournament, so you can have some random guy off the street, if he's willing to pay $25, he can jump in there and wrestle. We saw a guy here a couple of years ago, 67 years old.
Wow.
He wanted to get after it. I mean, he looked in great shape for 67, but unfortunately he got stuck. I think the first guy he lost to pinned him in like 15 seconds, so it was unfortunate. But I mean, hey, he was willing to pay, and hey, I mean, if you want to come out, I've seen some guys. There was a guy that actually coached at Colorado Mines about a decade ago. His name was Steve Kimple, and he actually made it all the way to the championship matches, and he's like in his mid-40s. So, and I guess he was like a stud back in his younger years or whatever. So it's an interesting mix sometimes at the Bob Smith Open, which sometimes that provides a little entertainment on the side as well, depending on who all decides to enter themselves into the action.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Men's cross country placed 29th at the NCAA D2 National Championships.
Yes, cross country ended on a great note. It was awesome for them to finish 4th at the regional. Got another crack at that course in Joplin to get themselves qualified. Obviously, the men were one of the 10 teams that were selected, I guess, was an at-large selection for making the national championship field. They finished 4th at the regional. The top 3 were automatically placed into the nationals, but the men were one of those teams that, by criteria and how they did at the regional and how they did throughout the year, the championship committee decided that's good enough. We'll put you in as a team, and so they got the opportunity to go down there and compete with some of the elite teams in the country, and that's great for them to round out the year. As we talked earlier in the fall, having that team concept of how they ran, they packed together, they knew how to score points as a team, and by using that philosophy, that gave them a chance to go compete in California for the national championship.
Men's basketball came up short against Southwest Baptist, 74-71, but they finished its week of play on a high note. During the home opener, they lit up the scoreboard for a 106-57 win over Sterling.
Yeah, unfortunate that game earlier in the week in Kansas City didn't go our way. Southwest Baptist, obviously a former team of the MIAA now. Now they're playing the Great Lakes Valley Conference as new members over there. Well, I guess they were associate members of that conference in a couple of things, but now they're fully members of the GLVC. But, Southwest Baptist has been one of those teams that was kind of a middle-of-the-pack team in the MIAA, and they had some guys on their roster that we knew that was going to be a tough game with some of their returners. One of their guys just absolutely lit up the scoreboard on Tuesday. I mean, he was shooting the ball really, really well. When it left his hand, every time it seemed like, oh, yeah, that looks good. Yep, that's good. So, it was one of those days where we just kind of ran into a hot shooting team early. We got down by about 15 points, and it kind of stayed there throughout the, duration of the first half and early in the second half till we finally made a good push at them there at the end of the game, put some pressure on them full court. They didn't handle it so well, and we really scored a lot of points in that last 50 seconds of the game. Gave ourselves a chance. We even had 2 looks to tie the game right before the buzzer, and unfortunately those 2 3-point attempts fell off the mark. But yes, to come back here at home after that kind of leaves a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth, how that game went in Kansas City, but to come here and really lay it to Sterling and the guys, they really played really good defense early on, and I think that really generated the offensive looks that they got. I think that's something that Mark Johnson said after the game on his radio show. You play hard defense, it's going to create good offensive opportunities, and it did just that. And to see some of the guys that maybe were struggling early offensively, especially some of our newcomers and transfers, I think they're starting to figure out a little more of their identity and role on the team. And it's games like that where they can get more experience and be out there on the floor and feel more comfortable about what they're doing. That'll be good for us going forward this year.
And they'll be at Nebraska Kearney this Tuesday for a 7:30 p.m. tip-off. Yeah,
conference play already starting up. It seems like we just kind of got non-con underway, but now we're already getting into MIAA play, and we'll just dabble in that real quick. We're going to play 2 games in MIAA play, and then we're going to go back to some non-con games before we get to the Christmas break. But these are two big games for the men. Obviously, being road games, Kearney and Emporia have been teams that they've been kind of right around the 500 mark in overall records the last couple of years. So and they're right there again to start the year. But we're 4-2 to start the year. So this is a good chance for our men to maybe get a good foot forward, get a good start in conference play, because the way it's looking, there's a lot of teams up towards the top, even some unexpected ones that have come out of the gates really good. So I don't know. I mean, we know Northwest Missouri is very, very good. Obviously, defending national champions, and it doesn't look like they've skipped a beat to start the year. They're rolling right through opponents left and right. So I fully expect them to be, near the top of the standings, obviously, at the end of the year, if not, potentially going to win the conference again. But there's some teams like a Rogers State or a Northeastern State out of Oklahoma that I think that surprised some people. And Missouri Southern obviously was in the national rankings to start the year. So it's squads like that that hopefully, we can elevate our game to chase some of those teams down and be amongst that mix at the top of the standings when the season settles. So.
And then tip-off Saturday in Emporia for the men will be at 3:30.
Yes, obviously, White Auditorium is always a hard place to play, and we've seen that on both the men's and women's side. So hopefully the men will get a good result at both places this week. Women's
basketball posted a record 106-22 win over the University of St. Mary on Monday, and wrapped up its homestand Saturday with an 88-36 win over Tabor.
Yeah, a couple of, cruise control wins for the women's squad. A couple of NAIA opponents this last week, and that first one against the University of St. Mary. They came into the game 1-7. We knew that they were having a tough season to start with, but when we found out before the game that they were going to hold out a couple of their best players too, probably for the sake of not getting them injured, these NAIA schools can claim these games against us as exhibition contests, even though we claim them as regular wins. And so I think, that's what kind of precipitated as big of a margin as we saw I don't even know how many points that is. It's over 80 as far as a spread. And, that's going to happen when you have a team that you get down to 9 players, suited up. You don't have your top 2 or 3 players, and you're already just a 1-win team on the season. I mean, those things are going to happen. Our team just went out and did, what they normally do. Yeah, you can't fault them for, like running up the score or anything like that. They're just going through, what they've been coached to do. And when you have your 3rd string and 2nd string in there late in the game, and they're practicing things and being ready for what's to come ahead in the season, in the grind of the MIAA season. So you got to think about all those things in context. Some people will be like, well, why are you running up the score? That's not what they're doing. They're working on things they need to work on, and that's just kind of a byproduct of how everything unfolded that night. And looking at the Tabor win, obviously another big margin, but Tabor is a little bit better squad as far as KCAC opponent is concerned. They were nationally ranked in the NAIA to start the year. Now they've had a little bit of a tough go to open the year, probably not quite as good as what they were the year before, but it's the same scenario. Those are opportunities for us to see how our 2nd and 3rd string is going to respond in some game situations and get them looks, because you never know when we may need to call upon some of them in these very big MIAA contests to come off the bench and do some big things for us. So that's the reason, why you play the game all the way, through all 60, whatever that is, 40 minutes of a basketball game. Sorry, I'm thinking football in my head, 60 minutes. But yeah, I mean, that's why you play the game, is to work on all those things. So.
And then also, looking at those scores, it helps that the outside shots for the women were falling as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how a score, really comes up really fast too, is if you're hitting your 3-point shots, and you take quite a few, which obviously they had the 17 threes against St. Mary, which set a new record for a game. But yeah, when they're falling from the outside, and plus what the defense that St. Mary was playing as well, they were just like, hey, we're going to play this zone defense, and they're basically telling you, well, there's where we're going to give you the open shot. So I mean, we took shots left and right from out beyond the arc in that game, whereas Tabor, the way they were playing more of a man-to-man style, we could cut to the basket, we could make more 2-point opportunities in that game. So sometimes it's what the defense gives you as well.
Yes, definitely. And like the men, the women will also see the MIAA opponents of Nebraska Kearney and Emporia State.
Yeah, and those are going to be two really big games for the women right out of the gate. We're talking about how big these wins, or at least margin-wise, were against the NAIA opponents. But like I said, you got to use those as tune-ups for these big MIAA contests, and these are two humongous ones right out of the gate for the women. Everybody's kind of like, well, Nebraska Kearney, why? Hey, if you've looked at Nebraska Kearney's women the last few years, Carrie Amy, which was one of our former assistant coaches under Tony Hobson, she's really built a really good squad up there in Kearney. And if I don't have to remind people, we were down 20 at their place last year and had to rally all the way back to force overtime and win. So we got kind of lucky on that game, honestly, that we got hot at the right time and were able to force the extra period that we did. And then we all know how hard it is to win at Emporia on the women's side. With the established program that they've been for, good 2-3 decades, and how good they've been on a national level in that span. We're the top dog now, being number 5 in the country, and we're the only one in the national rankings right now for the WBCA poll. But Emporia State's always capable, and they're probably going to have another great year this year. So we've got to go there ready to play, and that's just two huge contests for the women this week, and hopefully we'll get off to a good start in MIAA play and keep this thing rolling, and maybe have a good chance to do big things by the end of the season, and maybe host a regional again by the end of the year. So we'll see how it all shakes down, but it all starts with these two games starting this week on the road. Yes,
definitely. Well, that wraps up this week. Thanks for joining me today, Ryan.
No problem.
That concludes this episode. Tune in next week for another episode of This Week in Tiger Athletics. And as always, to stay up to date on the latest news and information throughout the week, visit tigermedianet.com.